nonprofits reach out to see how they can help, and we will need their help when I describe to you what I'm about to describe. I'm going to start with the easy part first. We have about 10 or so schools that were shut down today only because they did not have power. Many of those started to receive power during the day, but we did not want to take a chance and have students show up in the dark, not knowing when Encore and other people could get to those schools. But schools like Roosevelt and South Oak Cliff at Village Fair, they've already been given the clearance to have school tomorrow. And so we have a handful of those schools that already know. We have a few others, because of access, they still don't know. But we have history of dealing with schools that have power outages. So overnight, we will be making those decisions about which ones of those schools can have access. We'll give you a list of those towards the end of the meeting, or be able to describe those in detail. But those are not the problem. We know we have a good solution for those in the immediate future. The next three that I'm going to talk about are a little bit more challenging. One of them is Pershing Elementary School. And Pershing Elementary School, we could not have access to the property today because of the significant damage in that community and in that neighborhood. And so while we think that the building will be okay, we did not have an opportunity to prep the building today. So they will not have school tomorrow. Pershing Elementary will be out tomorrow morning. We think that once we get access, we'll be able to be in that building as soon as Wednesday. If we don't get access, then those students will report Wednesday to another location. And we'll tell you that in just a moment. There are two other schools that are a little bit more problematic than Pershing, and those are Cigaroa and Burnett Elementary Schools. Both those schools have significant damage. They have roof problems. They also have a lot of downed lines, power lines, and trees in the area. So we know that Encore has told us that we may not have access to those facilities for several days. But we cannot let these students stay home. So we've been in contact with their principals. We're getting the word out, and you're going to help us do that. And so those two schools will report to Lowe's Fieldhouse on Wednesday. And their teachers will be there, food service will be there. We will have as much of a resemblance of school as we can, but we need to get their parents back to work. We need to get those schools functioning. And so on Wednesday, they will be at Lowe's Fieldhouse. We think that we can get those buildings operable by next Monday, and that is our intent, to go and have them operable by the 28th. We could have Pershing there with them, so there could be 3 schools actually at Lowe's Fieldhouse starting on Wednesday. And then that takes me to the 3 most severe issues that we have. And they're all located very close to each other. And I'll start with Walnut Hill Elementary School. Walnut Hill, as you know, is an outstanding school. It has gotten blue ribbon status again for the second time. It's a national blue ribbon school. We have a lot of parents who choose to go there that don't live in that community. But that school is severely damaged. We don't know that, in fact, the insurance adjusters have been there and are basically telling us it's going to be a total loss. So there's no way for them to have school there anytime in the near future. In the bond program considerations we've been having, there was going to be a discussion about the future of Walnut Hill, whether we needed to build them a new school or not. So what we're going to do for the immediate future is we're going to move those students intact, all their principals and teachers, and we're going to take them to Tom Field Elementary School. We shut down Tom Field last year, so it is open and available. We've had crews in there making sure it's presentable. So on Wednesday, all of our students from this school will be going to Tom Field, and they will start operating. Food service will transfer all their situations over there. We've mobilized the entire team, and so we expect to have school for Walnut Hill at Tom Field. That will probably be their location for a year and a half until we figure out the first steps forward for the Walnut Hill property as to what we do in the future. The next one is also not as easy, and that is Cary Middle School. It's probably the most damaged. When I drove by there this morning, I saw a police vehicle that had been lifted from the parking lot and thrown very close to the school. There was significant damage throughout that school. I will anticipate that that will also be a total loss. We have about 500 students there. That one, we don't have a location where we can send all the students. So I've been in contact with the trustees, and I told them that in these kind of crises, you have to make some command decisions, and we'll have items for ratification next week at the board meeting that we have scheduled for next Tuesday. But we're going to have to split up that school at this point. We're going to send students that live in a certain, there's a natural boundary, and we're going to send about a third of the students to Medrano Middle School. Medrano Middle School is a relatively new middle school, and they have plenty of space for about 200 students. The other 300 students who live on another part of that attendance zone are going to have to go to Franklin Middle School, effective Wednesday. And we have enough space at Franklin Middle School to accommodate those students. And so those teachers will be split up. We're in the process of doing that over the next 24 to 48 hours, and we're notifying the families of which students are going to be going to Medrano and which students are going to be going to Franklin. As you can tell, this is a very big ordeal as to try to figure out all the details here in short order. And then also we have another issue, and that's with Thomas Jefferson High School. Thomas Jefferson High School also received significant damage. However, a structural engineer will have to tell us whether we even have access to the school, inside the school or not. But from a visual view of that school with our staff members, it looks like it received less damage than Walnut Hill and Cary. There is an opportunity maybe that with some good fortune, and since we already have a construction project there, we could turn that contractor loose and hopefully be back in that school next August. But there is no way that school can be inhabited between now and August. We have about 1,800 students at Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is one of our higher performing high schools here recently, which wasn't the case when I got back, but they've made a lot of progress at Thomas Jefferson. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of places to go to move 1,800 students, but we do have a space in West Dallas. So we're going to move Thomas Jefferson High School to Thomas Edison, the former school that we have in West Dallas. We're currently using it for staff training. We're using it for a lot of other staff offices that we'll have to relocate. And our expectation is that we will have that school ready on Wednesday. So we're going to ask our Thomas Jefferson Patriots to make that move almost within the next 48 hours. It is our expectation that we will open school there on Wednesday. And so we've been working ever since we had a chance to visually see the facilities, walk them. We've been planning all day with our staffs. There weren't a lot of options, so we're trying to make the best of a very significant situation. But I do want to thank my staff who worked all day to come up with these options that we think are viable. The students will miss a couple of days of school today and tomorrow, but we expect students to be back learning on Wednesday. So that's kind of the status of where we are right now. We're very pleased. Once again, I want to reiterate the support we've gotten from every entity that we've notified, the state agency. We've notified our local officials. We've notified our school board members. And with that being said, I'll be glad to entertain a few questions about where we go from here. Yes, sir.
How does the breakfast and lunch situation look for students who are in these affected schools?
We're very fortunate that we have a stellar food service program. We have breakfast in the classroom where we package up breakfast every morning anyway. And then we also have emergency breakfasts whenever we have, or lunches when we have problems in the school with power. So they have a prepared menu that they will have that meets federal requirements for lunch. And so we have a protocol of how to implement that if we ever have a shutdown of a school because of power outages. So we'll do that for a few days, but we'll have a kitchen at Thomas Edison. We have, obviously we have a kitchen at our school in Northwest Dallas. And so the other schools have kitchens. So we think we'll actually get hot lunches by Wednesday or Thursday. But that's a very good question. Yes, sir, in the back.
Is there a procedure in place for moving an entire school intact, or are you coming up with a plan as you go along?
Well, we've been fortunate to have procedures. Last couple of years ago, when we moved South Oak Cliff from the building to Village Fair, we had a very tight protocol that we had to move everybody over a 2-week period. Right now, we know that those buildings that we've inspected are in good shape. What we don't know, what's really tough for the teachers, they can't even have access to their classrooms. We can't, because of the structural damage that could be there. So we'll have opportunities to set up classrooms where they'll have some generic materials. But if we get clearance from the structural engineers, then we'll allow our teachers over the next week or so to move their personal things over. But we can have school on Wednesday at those other facilities just because they're prime and ready to go. Yes, sir, right here in the front.
What plan do you have for transportation to get the kids from and back?
Yes.
How far is the longest
Yeah.
travel?
The longest route is from Thomas Jefferson to Thomas Edison, which is about 9 miles. It's about 4 miles, 4.5 miles from to Tom Field School from our school there, you know, in that area. And the other schools are also 3 to 4 miles. Transportation was in all of those meetings. We're very fortunate that we have our own transportation department now. We don't have to depend on other people like we used to do in the past, where we can pivot. And our officials, they're planning on that right now. They're rerouting fields. We may have to have the students show up to a location, and then we'll move them from a central location. But our teams are working on that right now. We're very confident we can pull that off. Corbett?
Extracurriculars and things like that at TJ, what is that?
Yes, we're in the process, and we haven't even made this public, but we have some great partners and great nonprofits in this community. Pinkston actually works out at Mercy Street right now, and they have some AstroTurf fields right there. Their extracurricular facilities are completely wiped out. Their weight room is wiped out. The baseball field is gone, and so they have no place to practice at Thomas Jefferson. Luckily, Thomas Edison was a middle school. They do have gyms, so at least the volleyball and basketball teams can practice in those gyms as we get started. And then they play their competition games at Los and other places anyway. So we're working on the details. Their equipment may be gone. We may not have access to their equipment for a while, but we're working on some of those details. But we'll have some interim plans for extracurricular activities so they don't have to cancel any ball games. And it'll be very inconvenient, but we think we can manage it.
What is
Yeah.
your process of, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What is your process of alerting the students at Cary Middle School and their families of how this split is going to take place and separate the 200 from the 300?
But we've been in contact with the principal supervisors on those campuses. We've been in contact with those principals today. We're starting the process. First of all, we had to notify our school board, and the school board unanimously supported me in this plan. And so now we're going to start notifying the students about where they reside as to which school they're going to go to. And then the tougher part is then splitting up the staff members as to, we got to make sure that we're offering the kind of classes that they were taking at Cary at those other schools, and their schedules are going to have to match. But we have to take care of those finite details by Wednesday. So we have people working around the clock to pull that off. Yes.
I know this may be a little early in the game, but tornadoes are pretty traumatic situations. Do you have any plans for extra counselors or extra support for the kids who may have been in that situation in that path?
Absolutely. We've already talked about it. That was one of the first things we talked about. That was one of the epiphanies I had when I drove around that school. Walnut Hill Elementary has such a rich history. I could see as I was looking at that building as to there are some kids that are going to be traumatized by how that building looks right now. And some families are going to drive by there. So we have alerted our counseling department that we need to be there. We have a crisis counseling team that do make themselves available. Obviously, they'll be at Tom Field, they'll be at Thomas Edison, and they'll be at the other 2 schools, Franklin and Medrano, where these students are going. So we have thought about that. We had a lot of discussions about that today. It's never too early, because for young kids to see those kinds of things, it can have a traumatic impact.
When might you know more about Walnut and even some of the other schools that you're not sure about?
Yeah, I think, like tonight, we'll know if we can have access to some of those schools that had minor issues. Really, it just depends. We're dependent on Encore, but we know they have to follow their protocols. And there were even some concerns about gas leaks. And so we got to make sure all those things get taken care of. And that's why we have contingency plans. It's not ideal for these kids to go to Lowe's Fieldhouse for 2 or 3 days, but we'd rather do that than have them stay at home. At least they'll be under the care of adults. But we need to make a very The insurance adjuster has already told us we have a huge problem at Walnut Hill, so we don't have a lot of expectation that we can make a comeback. I think the key is gonna be Thomas Jefferson. If we don't have a lot of structural damage, our expectation is that we can be back in there next August, and so that'll be the one that's the biggest key. Cary, I have no hope for, as what I saw this morning, that we can get back in there at any time in the near future.
I know we're early in the ballgame, but what type of unexpected expenses do you think are going to incur this year that will impact the district?
There are going to be unexpected expenses. Luckily, we have insurance for some of this. Some of that is uninsurable. Some of this is just going to be human costs. But this is one of the reasons we're very fortunate in this district that we have a very healthy reserve. We have close to over $600 million in our reserve account, and there are things that maybe can be reimbursed later. So that's why we've been building this healthy reserve for a long time, and we haven't spent it. We've got it set aside for a rainy day, and obviously this was much more than a rainy day, and it kind of shook us to our core. But the fortunate thing is that we have resources that are currently available. We don't have to ask another agency or another entity for money, and hopefully we can reimburse those savings accounts if we have to use them. Great question. Maybe time for one or two more.
Do you have a ballpark figure of how much that it's gonna cost the district?
Now, very preliminary right now. A lot depends on if there are structural damages to those schools. Then the numbers will get big. If they're just cosmetic and other kinds of things, equipment, those things aren't as drastic. We don't know. It's way too early to speculate on that right now. We'll obviously keep the board informed on what opportunities we may need to have. We're also fortunate that we're planning for a bond election coming up real soon, and so this can give us more data that community committee can work on. Yes, we have another question over here.
When you're out and about in the community, did you have an opportunity to come face to face with any of the students, any of the parents? What's the sentiment? How do you sort of look them in their face and explain to them what's happening and what you're doing to try to make this transition as smooth as possible?
Yeah, actually, when I drove by the school today, people were walking around kind of like zombies. People were just like, oh my God, what happened here? And they're just in disbelief. And I'll go to my office and I turn on CNN, and there it is, we're on CNN. So it's amazing how the traumatic impact it has. My message to them is that we have a very strong team, we are a strong community. Dallas has a can-do spirit, a can-do attitude, and that all the entities will work together. This is going to be very inconvenient for these families. We have a feeder pattern, an elementary, a middle school, and a high school right there. And a lot of kids live in that neighborhood, and they've grown up in that neighborhood, and that's all they know. This is going to be very inconvenient. But we're very fortunate that we could make some decisions and actually have them back in school on Wednesday. And what happens during these traumatic times, if people have a lot of downtime, it really weighs on the psyche of people. But the fact that we're going to get them engaged and get them busy right away, I think is going to work to our benefit. And we're so fortunate to have these other resources to make that happen. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Thank you.